So good morning and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kahanyshyn, and as it says on the slide there, I am the EVP of IT and the CISO with Consero Global. And I'm proud to be here, and I will be the moderator for this session, and I will let our two guests introduce themselves. And I guess, Sandy, we're starting with you.
Hi, I'm Sandy Serkes. I'm the CEO of Valora Technologies. We focus on what most AI strategies skip, getting the enterprise data environment clean, controlled, and reliable enough for AI to actually work in regulated real-world environments.
Good afternoon, Jeff Bradbury. I'm the VP of IT and Security at Boston Ventures. I'm responsible for everything technology, security, and AI related. There's been quite a bit more in the AI space, so lots of good stuff and lots of fun stuff to talk about.
So thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Sandy, for the introduction. So I have a series of questions that I will ask both Sandy and Jeff, and at the same time, we're looking for your participation. So if you feel that if you have any questions, we would ask that please put them in the chat session, and we will get to them at the end. And so I will begin. And Sandy, first question is to you. What does AI readiness mean for organizations today? And where are most companies falling short?
Sure. So I actually think there's a couple meanings to that question. The first would be, what does it mean to be AI ready? I think the first is to be ready for systems and tools to handle processes and potentially even decisions that humans used to do. So that means accepting, potential job or task displacement, accepting uncertainty and potentially error, and being ready to adjust or retrain or retool to course correct when the AI doesn't quite get it right. So that's systems and tools. Then I think there's to also be ready, you have to kind of train your AI with the right and the best content, not just dumping everything you have into your AI LLM. So that means making sure that your data estate is up to par, having a hard look at what you have, where it is, who has access, whether it's appropriate, how clean and curated is your data population. And then the kind of third area is making sure that you have what I would call decision guidance for the AI to follow. How do we as an organization handle privacy? What makes one result better than another? What makes an appropriate or an inappropriate answer? What risks are acceptable and what risks aren't? All of these, we're going to get into information governance, but that's kind of where this plays. And to answer the question of where are most companies falling short, it is definitely on the second one, which is most organizations have no idea what data they have, why they have it, where it came from, whether they should have it, how old it is, whether it's sensitive or not, whether any of it is an official record or they can get rid of it. Everybody's just like kind of lost.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Sandy. That's good. Jeff, you're up next. From a private equity perspective, how are you evaluating AI readiness across your portfolio companies?
So from a private equity perspective, I think we're really looking at it through two different lenses. I think the first thing we look at is how is AI going to create value for the companies? And that could be a number of things, everything from improving productivity, strengthening reporting, enhancing the customer experience, or making operations more efficient. The second view is how is the company going to do this safely, right? How are they going to adopt AI safely? And that really comes down to the foundation underneath it. So if a company's their data is siloed, that's going to make things more difficult, right? So the key things that we focus on is not just running a pilot, because most companies can run an AI pilot. It's whether or not they can scale that AI solution in a way that's repeatable, controlled, and tied to some type of business outcome. So for us, this is really where AI readiness becomes part of operational maturity. So we don't view it as just a technology issue, uh, but a way that companies can grow and protect their value as AI evolves and becomes a greater part of the business strategy. So we're not just asking whether companies can use AI, we're asking whether or not they can use it safely and create value.
Yes, very important. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Sandy, back to you. So for question 3, can you clarify the difference between data management and information governance, and why both matter before AI is introduced into the organization?
Sure thing. So data management typically means storage, management, and accessibility of enterprise data. Very often people use that to mean structured data, databases, rows and columns, things like that. There's also a ton of unstructured data, documents, files, file shares, records. Um, and so information governance is a governance layer, sort of a that sits on top of both of those. So information governance is about risk reduction, compliance, and decision integrity. Allison, this would be a good time to show that slide with all the boxes on it. So information governance typically comprises things like records management, e-discovery, privacy, AI readiness, which is why, kind of we're talking about this today, and a whole other, it basically concerns the proper treatment and management and lifecycle management of enterprise data. So there's IG in a nutshell. Both matter before you introduce AI, because AI is going to be trained on your enterprise data, and it will only be ultimately as strong or as weak as the data that's available to it. So if your data is clean and well curated and lifecycle managed and appropriate to the task, then your results are going to be strong. If your data is messy and it's full of duplicates and old things and sensitive data is all in there, then your results will be poor and potentially a liability depending on what its surface is.
Thank you, Sandy. No, absolutely. And Jeff, next question is to you, focusing on AI. What risks concern you most when organizations are moving too quickly into AI without a strong data foundation?
So I think the biggest risk is that AI amplifies what's already there. So if you've got a strong foundation, if the data is strong, AI can really create leverage. But if the data is incomplete, inconsistent, poorly governed, AI is just going to make those problems worse. So if you've got poor data, that's going to lead to poor decision making. If the permissions around your data is weak, that's going to be exposed. If you've got unapproved tools, that can create privacy and compliance risks. I think one of the things I like to remind teams is that AI can make a bad answer very convincing. It can produce something that sounds polished and authoritative, even when it's wrong. And this is where it's really important to make sure that you've got a trusted data source, clear governance, and that people are doing that final review, especially when important decisions are being made based off of that data. So it's I can't stress enough that having your house in order up front is going to really make that journey that much smoother.
Yeah, no, absolutely clean and reliable data. Thank you, Jeff. Sandy, back to you. Next question. What are you seeing across the market in terms of how organizations are preparing their data for AI?
I would say the number one thing that we see is rot removal. And if you're not familiar with that term rot, that stands for redundant, obsolete, and trivial. It's kind of a polite industry term for junk. So specifically looking for the number one rot is duplicates, identical duplicates. And believe it or not, most organizations have about 50% of their data is rot. So that is a huge number, and it really has a great impact on the results of AI and other things. So Rot is probably the easiest, fastest, low cost, high impact thing that you can surface and get rid of. But that really is like, that's literally step one. That's just like, scraping the surface. Um, for organizations that are a little bit more serious about data remediation, the next step is definitely auto classification. And that is using technology software to determine what you have, where it lives, what should be kept, what should be deleted, and providing kind of a hierarchy of acceptable data from best choice to worst choice for different categories. And then the most advanced organizations are ultimately coming up with kind of rules and triggering scoring rubrics to kind of determine AI acceptability for each data asset in the organization. That's the gold standard right there.
Makes sense. I didn't know that's what rot meant.
Now you
Thank you.
know.
Now I know. And yeah, so we'll go back to Jeff. So Jeff, you have the next question and we'll get into security. So how do security frameworks like SOC 2 or CIS controls enable AI adoption rather than slow it down?
That's a great question. So security frameworks like SOC 2 and CIS controls, they help the company answer the questions that are going to come with AI adoption. Um, they clarify where the data is at, who can access it, who has the authority to prove its use, um, whether or not vendors are reviewed and monitored, and most importantly, what happens when something goes wrong. So, working through, the process of becoming compliant with those frameworks is really going to pay dividends in the long run because you're going to be that much more prepared during your AI journey. Without that structure, all of your AI initiatives, they become, these one-off debates, which can really slow your business down. If you get the right framework in place, companies can create repeatable processes, teams know the rules, leaders are going to have more confidence, and the customers are going to have more trust in your capabilities to execute, right? I think when properly implemented, security frameworks, they're going to help clear those obstacles, and they're going to allow your organization to accelerate a lot faster.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
that. We went through our first SOC 2 about 18 months ago. And yeah, that like tightened up processes everywhere throughout the organization, not just AI. AI benefited, yes, but everything kind of benefits when you start to have the discipline of a SOC 2 kind of framework around you.
Yeah, and just to tack a little more on, because I couldn't agree more. And the industries are realizing it as well. You're starting to see some of the big organizations come out with guidance around what are the best controls you can put in place, or recommended controls to put in place. So it's no longer the Wild West, right? There's definitely places to look to get the answers and make sure you're moving in the right direction.
No, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Sandy. Very important, and from Jeff, from moving on from the security requirements, best practices. Sandy, to you, the next question, really focusing on sensitive information. So, question to you is, for organizations that are handling sensitive data like personally identifiable information, or PII, or protected health information, or PHI, what must be in place before using AI tools?
And I'll throw another one in there, which tends to get lumped in there, which is PCI, personal credit information, like your
Yeah.
credit cards and things like that. So I have kind of thought this through, and I'll say there are two must-haves, and then there's some pretty good ideas. So the first must-have is a clean and accurate understanding of where the sensitive data lives. And that has to be all cases, not just the obvious ones like, oh, that's a patient folder, or that's, an employee record in HR. Yes, of course, there's sensitive data in there, and very good that you know that. But what about the wayward document that got saved on a file share by accident that has all kinds of sensitive data? Or often people forget, what about structured data that has everybody's, salary history in there? So you have to know where all the sensitive data is. And then similarly, people think PII, PHI, PCI, that's our sensitive data. There's also stuff that's sensitive because of what it discusses. So things like, the CEO's compensation or the 11 secret herbs and spices, trade secrets, M&A plans. Those are all forms of sensitive data as well, and not so easy to just put your finger on or to write a regex that recognizes, a social security number sequence. That's a much more sophisticated type of sensitivity analysis, but it still counts because AI will certainly find it. So that's must have one, is that you have to know where that stuff lives. And then number two, and I mentioned this earlier, is to have the policies that go with that data. So clear, legally vetted policies for handling sensitive data. And that, but typically, by the way, that's sort of outside of AI. That's in general. The AI must also obey, just like the employees in the organization have to obey. But things like a data processing agreement or a BAA for healthcare type things, these are good examples of policies, kind of like SOC 2 in a way, that say this is how we will handle sensitive data in our organization, and we're going to kind of sign off on those procedures. So those are the two must-haves. The very good idea also, Pyle, is to have, the first one is an internal understanding of who in the organization is responsible for AI inputs and outputs. Who owns what the AI produces and does? Because like any other business process or personnel or a tool, who is liable? Whose name is on the bottom of the page when something goes wrong? There has to be somebody who's going to be held responsible. Nobody wants to, volunteer for that, but it's got to be, the buck has to stop with somebody. And then the other really good idea is auto-classification. It's going to go a long way to help you identify what you have and what's sensitive and where should it be and who should it be locked down and all of that. So I don't need to toot that horn too much, but it's a very good idea.
All about governance and management.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, it's and we're living in a fortunate time, right? So all of the tools needed for that, they exist. Whether you're Microsoft, Linux, or somewhere else, I mean, there's a variety of different tools that will help you classify that data, help you figure out where it is. So I think in 2026, there's no reason to get caught off guard by this, but there still are people that do. And unfortunately, it can get ugly real fast when the wrong data is exposed through some of these LLMs, and they expose it very quickly.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Jeff. So, Jeff, next question is to you. You have a large portfolio today, so interested in a response for this one. So, in your work with portfolio companies, what does good look like in practice for AI readiness?
It's a great question, and we do have a number of companies that are different sizes, so good's going to look a little different depending on the maturity of the company and where they're at. We definitely have some companies that are really leading the way on AI implementation, other companies that are very much in the experimental phase. But I think the important part is good does not have to mean complicated. And I try to stress that to everyone. Good starts with clarity. It's does the company know who owns, to Sandy's point, does the company know who owns that AI strategy? Do they know which tools are approved? Do they know what the basic rules around data governance are? Can they upload files? Should they not? And I think understanding that is going to help with experimentation. It's going to help people be confident in their exercises when they're using these tools to try to figure out how to work them into different workflows. But good also means knowing where to be careful. Customer data, employee data, financial and regulated data, these all require more oversight. So I think the best companies, they're being practical about it. They're not treating every AI initiative in the same way. They match the level of review to the level of risk. You're working with, high risk data. your review process and your due diligence around that's going to be a lot more intense than if you're just working with just normal run-of-the-mill data doing some research, right?
Yeah.
I think a practical approach for this is to create a two-lane system, where one lane is, it's your low-risk data. You're using it for stuff like drafting, summarization, brainstorming. This is non-sensitive data, right? You can move quickly. Your other lane is going to be, any data that's contains sensitive information, regulated data that's going to be used for important business decisions. When you're working with that type of data, the process around that needs to be a lot more structured. The review process is that much more critical. And I think if you've got this structure in place, it lets the company encourage safe experimentation without treating every use case like a major governance exercise, right? It goes back to, the right frameworks in place are going to allow you to kind of pave that road and move forward with confidence. And your employees are going to know, I can't do this, I can't do that for the systems they're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Can I
that's great.
expand on that, Brock? Because this is the second time today that I have heard this approach, this two-lane approach. This morning we were talking with a large insurer, and they had very much a system just like that, where they had all their applications and their data tiered. Now they had more than two lanes, but they have different handling for the different tier structures, and each tier represented a different kind of sensitivity and risk profile depending on what it was used for. And that helped not just, define, governance and things like that. It also defined things like who had access to this, and in, kind of dealing with, remediating the risk, obviously deal with the tier one systems first. So it set up an implicit priority instead of just having to boil the ocean. It was very clear what the game plan would be over the next, let's say, 2-3 years. So I thought actually that was a very mature way of dealing, and it did imply a certain understanding. Clearly, they understood, at least at a minimum, what was in each system. I feel like we often encounter organizations that are like, we have 300,000 file shares. We have no idea what's in any of them. Like, okay, maybe that should be step one.
Absolutely. Yeah, just knowledge of your data. Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Sandy. Um, Sandy, to you on compliance. Uh, Question. How should organizations think about the relationship between AI and compliance frameworks such as HIPAA, such as SOC 2?
Sure. And this isn't like, hard and fast yet. We're all still learning, but my understanding from kind of the legal folks in this industry is that AI basically is going to be like any other data handling that we do now that falls under these control mechanisms. So those frameworks already define how sensitive data should be handled, who should have access, when it should be deleted, whether you should have it at all. And so AI is just another way of how that data is being used. It's just another tool using the data. So it's the same obligations, it's just new use cases. That said, there are some AI specific control matrices. Allison, this is a good time to bring up that other slide. Like the best known one is in the EU is the EU AI Act, and they have put together an AI control matrix. Here in the US, NIST has done the same. So these are 4 different areas that you folks can look at that will provide an AI governance policy or an AI framework. I found all of them to be excellent, and I think there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You can just pick your favorite one of these and use that as a starting point. If you don't have SOC 2 or you don't use ISO, you can use one of these to kind of set the framework for your AI operations.
Yeah, and if I could just add on to that, um, another one that I really like, so CIS, Center for Internet Security, uh, they also have some guidance around AI, as well as IT security in general. And one of the things I like about CIS is it's got a tiered implementation. So depending on the maturity of your organization, the size of your organization, you can choose tiers that work for you, right? That are going to get you to a reasonable point. Um, so it's good to see that they're keeping up on the AI front as well. So if you're adding to the list, I would throw CIS on there as well.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Sandy. Jeff, final question is to you before we go to our audience. So, final question. How are organizations balancing the push for AI innovation with the need for security and compliance?
So, so I would say the best organizations, they're not treating innovation and those compliance controls as opposites. They're bringing they're working to bring the right people together early on in the process so they can define that safe path, but define that safe path before adoption becomes fragmented. Using we use a risk-based approach, and I think that's definitely the better way to go. It ties into that multi-tiered approach, that multi-lane approach, allowing you to kind of match up your controls and your compliance to the sensitivity of that data. And that allows you, again, it allows your low risk cases to move quickly, and your higher risk cases, you know where to put that attention, right? You know where to do that additional review. And the balance around this, it's important because unmanaged AI is going to create risk, where a good AI governance program is really going to allow you to create that operating leverage. I think a good way to look at it is governance should remove uncertainty. Teams shouldn't have to guess which tools are approved, what data can be uploaded, whether or not a use case needs to be reviewed. It should kind of be implicit, right? Not saying you shouldn't have those checks in place, but a good program is going to help your employees understand. So when they're out there, when they're experimenting, um, you know, they know which way they can go with less review or with more review, and they understand which kind of data they're working with. I think when the rules are clear up front, people move faster with confidence, and the company can encourage innovation without losing control of the program. And I'll say, across all the questions, I hope everyone sees that there's kind of a common theme here, and it's making sure that you've got the controls in place up front, making sure you know where your data's at, the sensitivity of that data, because that's really what's going to hold your program together. That's what's going to keep you moving in a positive direction without running into risk or compliance issues.
I'll add one more thing there. I mean, obviously, sensitivity has greater risk, especially because there can be penalties for, misusing sensitive data, things like that. But there's another whole avenue also that is a kind of a reason to get the house in order, and that is accuracy. Because if the AI is surfacing incorrect data, it doesn't know what's right and what's wrong. It's just finding stuff that seems to fit, with relevant, statistically relevant. It's a match, even if it's 25 years old or it's completely wrong or it's been rewritten 16 times. So having that kind of remediation, that cleanup to say this is right, this is wrong, or this is correct, this is incorrect, that's really important, because the last thing you want is to have your AI you build your whole system and it's just coming up with answers that are inaccurate. Then what was the point? And then the other thing is that it can be hard to kind of, we call it unbake the cake. Once your LLM has been trained on data that is incorrect or biased or whatever, it's kind of like making a cake with sour milk. You can't unbake that. You can't pull the milk back out after the cake has been baked. And no matter what you pile on top of the cake, it's still going to taste sour. And the same thing is true if you've trained your LLM on sort of bad or uncurated data. Then the train has left the station. There's no real way to pull that back other than to start over. So there's a lot of reasons beyond just sensitivity and risk. There's just kind of practical smarts that say to get your data in order first because you want your results to be productive for you at the end.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that more. I think, especially as these tools evolve, I know Claude has, capabilities to search your local file shares. They've got, ask your organization style features and things like that. And the last thing you want is, even if it's internal, you don't want it referencing your PTO policy from, 1990, right? You want to make sure that what it's seeing is accurate, and that stuff can build up quickly. So starting with that good data foundation is great for security productivity, but also for, to Sandy's point, that accuracy, because it doesn't know, right? Which
Actually,
policy do I use?
I'll toss one more thing in here. You didn't have this as one of the questions, but when you have the introduction of agentic AI, which is where AI agents are speaking amongst themselves, and there's basically no human activity going on in there, they are creating their own data. And so you really have the risk of where's the line, where is the accuracy and the correctness and the authority and the lineage on data that is being created between systems. So again, before you introduce agentic AI into your organization, make sure your starting points are kosher, because they will be off to the races so fast. The scale of activity of that, you almost can never pull that back once that's going.
Yeah, no, love the statement, baking the cake. That is
That wasn't
perfect.
my metaphor. I can't remember who told me that, but I absolutely love it.
And Jeff, I'm just reflecting quickly on one of your earlier comments to this question too, about, your organization knowing which data can and cannot be exposed, very important. And then even more important than that, it just looks like every single tool out there is getting some AI features. So, ensuring your organization knows which tools are actually approved. So that was perfect.
100%. Vendor due diligence is definitely evolving quickly if you're trying to keep tight controls on what gets ingested into AI and what doesn't. I mean, it's interesting too to see how companies are tackling it. Some companies are using a more forceful approach where, if you want to use our tool, we're going to work with your data, and others are being a little more customer centric and saying, hey, look, you've got the option opt in, opt out. I think more moving in that direction. But it's, you've got to make sure you understand what those vendors are doing, what they're doing with your data.
Yeah, data is gold. Absolutely. Sandy, Jeff, thank you very much for answering my questions. I will turn this back to Allison.
Yeah, thank you everyone for submitting questions. We've got a couple that came in. So Jeff, I believe this one came in when you were discussing from a private equity perspective, how are you evaluating AI readiness across the portfolio companies? So the attendee asked, what is the most important part of that evaluation process?
Sorry, one more time.
Yeah, so what is the most important part of the evaluation process? And that was when you were discussing evaluating AI readiness across your portfolio companies.
Yeah, so it's tough to pick one area as the most important, but I would, if I had to choose just one, I would say it's that understanding of the data. When a company is getting ready to move forward with any AI initiative, it can get ugly fast, whether it be customer data being exposed, incorrect responses. A lot of companies are trying to build, agents into their web pages where customers can ask questions or interact in a way, looking at different ways to provide customer support. And it's been shown several times that without the right controls, either around the data or even the agent itself, people get in there, they have fun with it. I think it was I don't want to misspeak. It was one of the big fast food companies decided to put an LLM on their webpage, and people were having fun with it, they were having to do programming for them because the controls weren't there. It didn't know that it needed to focus on, just, hey, what's on the menu? It's, someone's going to ask me a question, I'm going to give them an answer. But the really scary part for that is if that agent had access to sensitive internal data, without those controls, you can get it to write code when it should be giving you, the menu. You can get it to access other data. So I think knowing what your data is, where that data is critical, and then beyond that, making sure that your LLM has access to what you think it does and not more. So that's
Yeah.
definitely, those are definitely the key things we look at when companies are working with AI or trying to kick off AI initiatives, because the last thing we want is a self-inflicted wound because we didn't have our house in order.
Yeah, both brilliant and scary.
And then this next question that came in, I think, Sandy, this would be a good one for you. What are the first couple steps a company should take to become AI ready?
Sure. Well, I mean, we've said this a couple of times already, but number one is learn what data you have, run some auto classification software. And that is what we would call, that's sort of the first step. We call that observational information governance, because you're observing what do we have, right? It's kind of like a lay of the land. But from there, the next step is remediating the environment. Start to clean out duplicates, get rid of things that are old or past their retention life cycle, or that you shouldn't really even have. We haven't mentioned this yet on this webinar, but often when you are getting data from a client or from a patient or from an employee, there is an implicit permission involved in that. And that, we know that is opting in, right? But typically when information is gathered from a data subject, it is under the guise of a specific purpose. And I'll give you the classic example here. Let's say you're doing like a DoorDash or something like that, and you're ordering a pizza. So you give your cell phone number because that's part of the transaction. Now, you've given that as part of the transaction. The expectation is that when the transaction is complete, that they will no longer hang on to your cell phone number because you gave the information, you sort of opted in to the transaction. You didn't opt in for future use of your cell phone number. So if they maintain your cell phone number and send you a coupon 2 weeks later, hey, want some more pizza, $10 off, that is technically a violation of the kind of the circumstances under which you gave that information. So if you are cleaning up that organization and you said, we seem to have Allison's cell phone number here, but she gave it with permission for this one usage, the life cycle of that event has ended. So we really shouldn't have that data anymore. As delicious and wonderful as it might be for our marketing department, we don't get to use that data that way, even though it was obtained initially properly. You have to kind of continue to use that data properly throughout the life cycle, including disposing of it when it reaches its natural end point. So in that case, when that transaction was complete and Allison paid, that data should be flushed by rights. So that's what I mean by remediating. It's not just getting rid of dupes. It's not just getting rid of the 30-year-old human resources policy. Even though Allison did a transaction a week ago, technically we should get rid of that data right now, and it's only been 7 days. So there's more to remediation than sometimes meets the eye. And then the last areas are authoring those policies. There are 2 key policies. One would be and we've talked about this here, acceptable use, that is by humans. This is how you may use AI. And then the other is for the AI itself, which is these are the decision guardrails that the AI is allowed to operate in and should not violate, like no killing all humans. Maybe that should be number 1. And then what has to happen over time is you have to continuously repeat through these, because AI changes the game as it goes. So what data you have today is different than the data you'll have a week from now. You have to start over again. And remediation should be a constant thing, right? You're constantly collecting cell phone numbers of your next customer, and then those policies have to stay current with the next version of AI, the next agent that got created, whatever. It's like this constant game of staying in sync with itself.
No, that is great, Sandy. Thank you. I didn't think I'd ever be in a presentation where we'd be stating one of the three laws. So no, Allison, back to you.
Yeah. One more question we had come in. Jeff, I think this would be a good one for you as well. And Sandy, feel free to chime in if you like to. Looking ahead 12 to 24 months, what will separate organizations that successfully leverage AI from those that are struggling?
Yeah, so I think the difference is going to be disciplined execution. So you've got a lot of companies experimenting with AI. I think the successful companies are going to turn AI into a managed business capability rather than just a chat box that can do cool things, right? It's truly going to become a core component within the business. But to do this, it's going to require trusted data, clear ownership, practical governance, and you're going to have your use cases tied to some measurable value. For companies that struggle, it doesn't mean they're not going to be active. You're going to have plenty of companies that are very active in AI, but being active in AI doesn't mean you're having an impact, right? If you don't take the things we've discussed today into consideration, getting your house, if your data is still siloed, if your tools are fragmented, if ownership's unclear, AI is going to be really hard to scale. It's going to be really hard to make a core part of the business. I think the winners are going to be companies that build that foundation that they can keep using as AI changes, because AI is going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to change, but with the right governance and compliance foundation, having that data in order, that's something that's going to last no matter which direction we go with AI, whether it be chat functionality, things like co-work, or the agentic function. I think having the right stuff in the right places and knowing where it is and having the right controls, it's just going to allow you to continue to steam forward. So I think, I think integration, execution, and measurable value are going to be the three areas where the winners are going to excel at because of that foundation.
I'll pick up on that because what we are seeing is kind of a shift from historically the sort of institutional knowledge about organizations and how they work and where's the data on blah that lived inside people's heads, and that is now becoming codified into the content and these systems themselves. That is essentially what auto classification is. It's surfacing that knowledge as a set of lever tags. And so people, I mean, it's sort of not PC to say, but people are a little bit expendable. We change jobs, we join, we leave, organizations. AI is changing so fast. The only thing that is constant is the data itself. So it makes sense to have the smarts go to the data itself so that the data is almost broadcasting, this is what I am, this is how I am used, this is what I'm appropriate for, this is when I was born, this is when I should end. That makes a lot of sense, and that is the model that we are very quickly evolving to, which is away from the people. You're not, when Susan is on vacation, the business can still function, and away from the specific AI itself. Any AI tool can operate interchangeably, and that's going to be important because there's going to be 10 of them in use. That the data is the thing that's kind of holding it all together.
Yeah, and if I could tack a little bit onto that, I think it's a great point, right? Nobody wants to lose good people, right? Nobody wants to lose their talents. Nobody wants to lose their coworker. But people do go, right? And if your AI initiatives, if they're silent, if the experimentation that's happening, if someone's keeping it to themselves, you're losing knowledge that could otherwise be retained. I think one great example of that, whether it be OpenAI or Claude, I think with Claude, you've got the ability to create these things called skills, and it's beyond prompting, and you can get very elaborate with them, and you can do some really amazing things, and you can share those skills. So one of the things we do, whether it be here within BB or when we're working with companies across the portfolio who are trying to figure out the best way to leverage AI at that phase, We encourage to create that skills library, share it, encourage employees to share it. There's a number of amazing things people have done, whether it be in finance, marketing, or elsewhere around the company, where they've realized, hey, with Claude, with OpenAI, I can do this really cool thing, and it saves me a lot of time. It increases the quality of my work, and they're putting that into these skills that we're sharing across the company or across certain groups of people. So even if that rock star does leave, someone wins the lottery, right? Um, we still have those skills, we still have that knowledge, and it helps with the culture, right? It's getting people to work together, to think collaboratively with AI. Um, Creating that culture is going to help the business, and it's going to help your AI initiative, making people feel as though they can contribute, and they're benefiting the organization in that way. It's powerful. I think it's good all around.
There's
Yeah.
also critical spots where human in the loop is absolutely, utterly essential. We're never going to be in the situation where we just sit back and AI is doing everything. There's not a chance, because it doesn't have, and it probably never will have, judgment, experience, wisdom. These are very human attributes that are necessary to kind of course correct the AI. It's why we have to be paying attention to this, and that our role changes from kind of rote doing of things to overseeing and making decisions and making determinations about things. It's a higher order skill, quite frankly. It's a better use of a human brain than rote mechanical activity.
Great answers. Great conversation.